Hello, everybody. John Hinn with the Pulsing Cinema here, and the movie of the day is Richard Stanley's Dust Devil from 1992, around 1992, because this film released in 1993, and not really the full version, not really released until the late 90s, and then the early 2000s when it started coming out on DVD in both the UK and the US. So, Dust Devil, how do you describe this crazy movie Dust Devil in one sentence? I would describe it in one sentence as just weird stuff happens out in the desert. Weird stuff, possibly, most probably, likely, supernatural stuff can happen out in the desert. Richard Stanley was a South African. He grew up in South Africa, and he went to film school in South Africa. And Dust Devil was an early passion project for him. He tried to make it as a student film. They went out there in the desert with no funding in Namibia, in just this very inhospitable, dusty place full of sand and all kinds of people that you probably don't want to meet out there. Probably makes Wolf Creek look like Disneyland, or maybe it's quite like Wolf Creek. So Richard Stanley mentions Wolf Creek all the time in the commentary for Dust Devil, the UK commentary that he did, not the one on the Subversive, the US DVD. But in any case, Richard Stanley, he had this idea for a long time for Dust Devil. He went to Great Britain and got some notoriety in making music videos. He made a number of music videos for Fields of Nephilim, a few other guys, and he eventually got this project, Hardware, and he made this film, Hardware, which I've talked about many times, a beautiful, great-looking robot gone crazy science fiction film, dystopian, post-apocalyptic science fiction film in 1990. The film was shot for $1.95, but it looks like, a $20 million epic, Just definitely Richard Stanley was in the mold of a young James Cameron. Here's a guy who can make a film for $1.95 and it looks like, a $20 million epic. Definitely shades of the Terminator in that film, and people were trying to, put him up as the next, right? So again, my passion project, and he gets financing for it, and goes to Namibia, it goes to South Africa, shoots on location there, and things start to fall apart. He doesn't get the producers start making all these demands. Miramax is co-producing this film and financing it with Palace Pictures and a couple of other people in Europe. They demand he's got to have this actor, that actor. I think he wanted to use Stacey Travis from Hardware, and he couldn't use that. He had to use somebody else or whatever. But in any case, he continues making the film, and then towards the end of the film, things just fall apart. The European backers, the main guys, Palace Pictures, their business collapses, and he's left in a very uncomfortable area where half the money is gone, and the film just kind of dissipates and is eventually re-edited in a cut version, a little over 80 minutes, and released by Paramount on US Home Video in this horrible version. Richard Stanley is crushed by this. He feels he's lost his film, but toward the late 90s, he's able to finance a reconstruction, a final cut of the way he envisions the film, and it is shown on 35 millimeter. It gets a tiny little theatrical release in the UK, and then around 2006, It's released in the UK on DVD. And in the U.S., in just this beautiful, I think it was like a 5-disc DVD set. I have it still. It's great. It has a bunch of Richard Stanley documentaries that he was making in between Dust Devil and Hardware, and a lot of cool special features. So now you know a little bit about Richard Stanley and Hardware. What the hell is Dust Devil? Dust Devil is about this shape-shifting entity, which is kind of a little bit of the man with no name, a little bit of the character from Something Wicked This Way Comes. He's that mystery man, and he's played by Robert Burke, an American actor who had... he started out doing these art house films, Hal Hartley films, and then he got big notoriety when he was in RoboCop 3, and he's kind of in the recent years kind of bounced between art house films and then being in mainstream stuff like Two Guns, and done a hell of a lot of television. He was the monster in that Hal Hartley movie No Such Thing. So he's done a lot of stuff and gone on, and he plays this character who kind of appears in the desert and begins to walk through the desert. He's kind of half man, half spirit, and he's like this kind of demonic entity serial killer who's going around killing people and taking their souls. The idea is that he doesn't come to someone unless they call him, and the lonely people who want to die or want to kill themselves, they call him, and he comes. One of the people that calls him is this woman played by again American actress Chelsea Fields, who leaves her husband, and she basically drives into the South African, she doesn't know where she's going, but she just leaves her husband, and the rest of the film is kind of a cat and mouse between the Dust Devil, the shapeshifter, and this woman, where they're kind of playing this odd dance of death. In between that, you have the woman's husband, who is chasing after her and trying to find out where she's gone. And then you have a police detective played by South African actor Zax Mokehi, who is trying to unravel the mystery behind these mysterious serial killings that the Dust Devil is perpetrating across the outback, or whatever you call the South African desert stuff. Real surrealistic, real shades of Dust Devil. He's definitely still got the reddish, burnished world there, and definitely the shades of the Man with No Name, and the surrealist stuff of El Topo, and I'm sure all of that stuff was buzzing and twittering inside of Richard Stanley's head as he made this film. And it's got some good special effects. I think even Chris Cunningham worked on some of the visual effects, the special effects in this film. There's not really many special effects. Special visual effects. There's some makeup effects, and then most of the film succeeds on just the mood and the setting, which is just incredible. I mean, it's out there in Namibia in the desert. Toward the end of the film, the climax of the film takes place in this kind of this town which has been abandoned and is kind of drowning in sand. It's half submerged in sand. And it's quite unlike anything you've ever really seen, and it's quite incredible. And the soundtrack by Simon Boswell, which is kind of half spaghetti western, half a choral kind of dirge, which kind of brings in the spirituality of the film, is it's really cool, and it's something that you get the soundtrack as part of the 5-disc set the Dust Devil 5-disc set from Subversive, which I think is sadly out of print but very widely available. And that is just, I put that on, It's definitely something to pop into your CD player and just bounce around town. Not really. Maybe it's something to perform a ritualistic ceremony to, when you have your black mass on Sunday, right? Oh man. You could compare this film to, and you could compare Richard Stanley compares himself in the commentary track, for the US DVD, to Donald Cammell and his films like Performance and Demon Seed and White of the Eye. Definitely, you could compare this film to kind of White of the Eye, and definitely the ending of this film, the crazy theatrical ending to this film. Definitely, you could draw a good comparison to White of the Eye. So, but at the same time, the film, the subtext of the film is, South Africa and the tensions, the racial tensions of South Africa, and how the place isn't necessarily going to be that much of a rainbow coalition, and so there's some reality to the film in that. You see the tensions between the police officers and then the average Joes, and then how maybe somehow the Dust Devil is kind of feeding into this hate, feeding into the hate and despair of the land, and this is where he arrives, in places of strife and conflict where he can feed off of people. Another thing I want to point out is that the film was kind of vaguely based on a real story, a real serial killer who was in the Namibia area. There actually was a film which was more realistic, that was based on these killings, called Wind Prince. Wind Prince, which starred John Hurt, and I believe Sean Bean was in it as well. And there was a real serial killer who perpetrated a number of crimes, and it ended up, there was a big showdown in the hills where the police shot this guy. They cornered this guy and they killed him, and apparently they claimed he was the serial killer, though I don't think there was ever anything conclusive about it. But I don't think they could even identify this guy because they shot him in the face, and apparently they just shot his face off, and which actually also kind of plays into the what happens at the end of this film, which I guess I will keep a not well-guarded secret. And then there was, I think, something that happened with a family member of Richard Stanley, I think it was his sister or someone he knew, or someone that he'd read about, who had left her husband, and she just drove into into nowhere, into Africa, she was in South Africa, just drove out into nowhere, and wanted to kill herself, just wanted to disappear. And I don't think it's a relative. I apologize. I'm a little bit blurry on that story. So the film there was some real life elements which Richard Stanley took and he put together, and he came also, I guess he loves the idea of this magical character who can, go in and out of these real life scenarios, the Robert Burke, and kills people with this knife, and it's just so cool. So if you like horror films, like serial killer films that have an edge, that are kind of surreal, they're kind of out there, if you like spaghetti westerns, if you're into that kind of offbeat, kind of Palace Pictures type of mix of avant-garde stuff, all the influences that played into this film, then you're going to love it. You're going to just want to cherish it. And God, man, this movie needs to come out on Blu-ray. The DVDs are good. They're excellent. They're superb. But definitely need a Blu-ray of this. Yeah.